Hey there, welcome to the Thriving and Wellness Podcast with Haley and Caitlin. This podcast is for women who are tired of just surviving and are ready to truly thrive. It's time to reclaim your health and build trust in your body.
Join us as we myth bust nutrition topics, tackle your mindset, and dive into the nerdy side of women's health. Let's jump in. Haley, tell me about your own personal health journey, and where do you feel like it all started?
I feel like it's really hard I was kind of leading on to this before we hopped on, but it's hard to know exactly when it started because I tend to think about most of my health struggles, especially when it relates to hormones, starting in junior high school. And I'll definitely dive into that. But there was this vivid moment I remember when I was so embarrassed with my GI issues because my mom was teaching me a ballet class it was just me and my cousin, or my cousin and I. That's the proper grammar there. Anyways, she was visiting from Sweden and this special ballet class and everything. I was so excited. And for those of you who don't know, I grew up as a dancer. So I was doing ballet, jazz, tap, all the things, but definitely a lot of ballet. And so we were in this class and about halfway through, my stomach started to hurt and I didn't know what was going on. It was just very painful. And thinking back now, knowing what I know, I think I was just really constipated and I had some bad gas pains. But if you've ever experienced bad gas, that can be painful.
I mean, people go to the ER for that.
Yeah. And as a little kid, pain just seems even worse. And so I wasn't that young. I was maybe 9 to 10 or something like that. I spent the rest of the ballet class in the bathroom because I couldn't go to the bathroom. It was just so painful. And I was too embarrassed to go in. And they finally came out and checked on me, are you okay? And at that age, things like that, you don't really want to talk about. You're starting to become you're on the verge of a teenager, I don't know. That was one of my most vivid memories, but I do remember several times when I had that similar gas pain, even as I got older, and it was so debilitating and embarrassing and frustrating. But most of my hormone story started, I would say, 7th, 8th grade when I got the lead role as Cinderella in our ballet, and I was so excited. But I felt bad that the man I was partnering with, because I hired in a guest artist to do that, had to lift me because I felt like I was overweight. I was not anywhere near overweight, but I had this belief in my head that I was, and that just kind of started my slide into that disordered eating. I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder or anything, but looking back, I was proud that I was eating. I'm kind of jumping ahead here. So basically this started when I got Cinderella. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna lose some weight. So that's when I started learning about nutrition, things like that. And this is not to put the blame on my mom by any means, but she was trying to lose weight. And I think a lot of us, I know you and I have talked about this before, a lot of us have had that experience just growing up. In the 90s, diets were a big thing. And the South Beach diet was my mom's diet of choice. And so I read that book front to back. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to dedicate myself. And I did that diet and I took it to the extreme.
Oh my gosh. And you were what, 12 or 13 at this point?
At that point, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So, and the thing people were saying oh my gosh, you look so great. And you're so healthy. Because on the outside, it did look I never got to a point where I looked unhealthy, but so I did look like I was healthy and it looked like I was just taking my nutrition seriously. But with the South Beach, I think there's 3 phases, if I'm remembering correctly, right? The first phase, I think, is really low carbohydrate, and you're supposed to do that for a few weeks and then slowly introduce things. So it is a stepwise diet. But my thought was, hey, if this one aspect of it works, then I'm just going to go harder at it because it'll work better. Right.
Yeah.
We've all, I think, done that with other diets or eating less and exercising more. We cut calories and we work out more. And that's exactly what I did here. So I stayed on this very low carb diet for a long period of time and I slashed my calories unknowingly. I wasn't counting calories at this point, but I just had this list of yes or no foods. And so this food fear started at this point. And fast forward to high school, I think it was my sophomore year, I had a health class. And one of our assignments was to actually do like a 3-day food log which was kind of interesting knowing what we know now, but we had to do a food log. And I was proud that I was eating 800 calories. I was eating 800 calories. And that's something I was doing for years. And it was formative years, like when you're going through puberty and the hormones are adjusting and everything. And so I was doing that because of the South Beach diet. So ever since junior high up into my sophomore year, obviously I probably wasn't doing that every day, but most of the time I was eating less than 1,000 calories and low carb while dancing like 5 to 6 days a week and being in high school, having like PE and other things. Right. I was very active. Right.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder that led to some thyroid issues. And so I had lost weight pretty rapidly and I felt good about it. I was maintaining it. And then I gained weight really rapidly. So I think it was junior year of high school during like the nutcracker season. We talked about nutcracker on another episode recently, but during the nutcracker season, so you're in tights and leotard all the time. You're in the height of like lots of energy output. You're rehearsing all the time. I think I was never someone, and I'm still not someone to like step on the scale all the time, but just going to doctor's offices and getting an idea of where I was at, I think I gained like 30 pounds in like 1 to 2 months. Like I blew up.
Wow.
And for anyone that's rough, but for a teenager,
right. Yes.
Like, I don't know if it's safe to say like that's traumatizing because I was still eating like nothing.
Yeah.
So what did I do? I tried to eat less carbs and less calories. And then I was not only doing all my rehearsals and dancing, but I started going to the gym with my dad. So I was like, oh, I got to work out harder. I just got to go harder at this. So that eat less, exercise more. I am no stranger to that for sure. But basically, once I gained that weight, I was also exhausted. I was having to take a nap every day after school. I was barely making it through the school day without falling asleep. I wasn't fueling myself, so I was exhausted, obviously. But with the weight gain, with the exhaustion, with other symptoms I was having, my parents were trying to help me figure out what was going on. They didn't really understand how little I was eating because, again, from the outside, it kind of looked like I was just eating healthy.
Yeah.
And so that's when it kind of led me down this path of going to doctors, trying to figure out what was going on with the thyroid and everything. And I had I don't want to say several doctors, but multiple doctors tell me I was overweight. And that was not helpful in those situations.
And you're still in high school.
Yeah. Yeah. So I left I didn't leave high school, but like my parents had to call me out of high school several times for doctor's appointments. So junior year, I was going to a lot of different doctors. We actually went down to one in LA. So that's like 4 hours away from where we lived. Right. So my dad flew us down there and we'd go to the doctor's appointment, come back. I think we went down there because this was before pre-Zoom days. Yes. Now everything could be over video and stuff, but we actually had to go to the appointment and my parents had sought out this specialist and I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And I really wish now, like I had a record of my labs. I knew what medication I was on and all that, because I think it'd be really interesting to know. Obviously, as a teenager, I just wanted to feel better. I was so frustrated. And so they put me on medication and that helped a little bit, but ultimately it didn't get me where I needed to be. I felt like I was never losing the weight. I never had the energy. And so it was a long road. It was a long road. I'm going to skip over some of the details because that gets kind of boring, but basically it all came down to the fact that I was undernourishing myself and under fueling. So eating way too many calories, expending way too much energy for too long, especially in those formative years, that my thyroid just slowed way down as a protective mechanism. And I know you and I talk about this with clients a lot, is there's a lot of women who are undernourishing unintentionally.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so I had that experience firsthand, kind of more of like an extreme case of I was actually diagnosed with hypothyroidism versus just seeing like the thyroid labs aren't optimal. But I think it's a really good example too of, even though I was put on thyroid medication, I didn't really feel better because I was still not getting the nutrients I need. Like I most likely was not getting nearly enough potassium. And now we know like how important that potassium is for the thyroid. I was not getting enough carbohydrates. I'm pretty sure I was on just a T4 medication at first. And so I wasn't getting enough carbohydrates and everything. I was probably not converting it. All right. So it was no wonder that I didn't feel better. But then as the years went on, that kind of transitioned me into college and where I wanted to study nutrition. It was probably not for the healthiest reasons at that point of like, hey, if I lost weight with like dieting before, I better learn more about nutrition so then I can get this weight off in the future. Right. And so, but unfortunately, I feel like even in our classes, a lot of times it's still just talking about calorie counting. Like
For sure.
in my recollection, I don't feel like I feel like we had one class that talked about vitamins and minerals, but it wasn't how we think about it and focus on it now. Do you remember that class?
Yeah, metabolism.
Yeah, it was just like, well, I feel like yes, in metabolism, but also we had like a nutrition 101 course. I think it was like freshman year. Did you take that?
Oh yeah, it was still with Dr. Reeves.
It was, yeah. Yeah, that was my first introduction to him.
Oh yeah, mine too.
Yeah, so funny guy. Anyways, I remember that one just like memorizing, like these are the different vitamins and minerals, but not truly understanding like how crucial they are to things like thyroid health, right? Anyways, going back to the original part of my story, starting with gut stuff, that never stopped. And if you have struggled with thyroid issues, you know that slow thyroid usually means a slow gut. And so it can just like feed more into that constipation. And so I had several more episodes of that painful gas, feeling constipated. Whenever I would travel, I would go get constipated and it'd be so painful and I couldn't enjoy my trip. And I think there was other things that contributed to this, but I remember when I first moved into the dorms, I don't think I pooped for like a week. At least a week.
Our life was rough.
Yeah. Like one, I was embarrassed to go in like the stalls, but all the health issues did not contribute, the change in diet, all that. Anyways, there's a lot of different things. And I feel like I'm just kind of bouncing around now, but other hormonal aspects of it, like I used to have, when I did have my period, I had really bad cramps. Like there was one time my mom almost took me to the ER because I was about to pass out. And all that really stemmed from when I started with the dieting. Like I didn't have a family history of any hormonal issues, no PCOS, no thyroid issues in the family. It all started from when I wasn't giving my body the fuel it needed. And that's why I think I'm so passionate about talking about those foundations and understanding the importance of minerals, understanding the importance of getting in the food. Because no matter what medication you're taking or how many supplements you can take, we can't forget about those. Right.
And the medications and the supplements, like you know this firsthand, the medications don't work when you're not doing the foundations. Like you have to have that, and then the medications and the supplement, they're supportive, but they're not the end all be all.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example too, where some of this nuance gets lost on like Instagram and things like that. We're not saying medications don't help or that we're against medication.
For sure.
Like medications are crucial for a lot of people. I am pro medication, but where I am not supportive of it is when people just get on the medication without addressing, like understanding what's going on to help support their body otherwise. Right. I think with supplements, with medication, it all works with your diet and lifestyle to help you move forward and feel your best.
Yes. And there are times when medications often have side effects, and then you're taking more medications for the side effects. And so there's like a time and a place for a lot of these medications of like, use them to help get your thyroid to a better spot where you're feeling better. But then is it possible for you to come off this medication so you're not having the other side effects? Or, you know,
I know this is not applicable to the listeners here, but when I was I worked at a state hospital. So it was a psychiatric hospital basically, but for prisoners. The list of medications that they were on Like, obviously they were on a lot of psychiatric medications, but those psychiatric medications had so many side effects. And so I remember seeing lists of like 20 different medications. But most of them were like, oh, this medication's for high triglycerides because this medication causes that, or this is for constipation because that medication caused that. And yeah, and I see it too in practice, obviously not to that extreme, but I see people taking medications for the side effects. Or another thing I see, and I feel like this is totally getting away from my story here, but another thing I see is people just starting a medication and then just staying at that dose, never reevaluating it, even with thyroid too. So people will start a thyroid medication. They may or may not feel a difference in the beginning, but I'll ask people when they start working with me that when we're working on their thyroid health, they're like, oh yeah, it was tested maybe a couple years ago. Like they haven't adjusted the dose or anything. Like that stuff you need to stay on top of. You need to monitor that and understand, because your things can change how well you're absorbing or utilizing that thyroid medication, or how well your thyroid hormone is working. You need to stay on top of that, because that can really impact your day-to-day life.
Absolutely. I mean, the same thing with supplements.
Mm-hmm.
I have people that, oh, I've been on these supplements for 5 years. I don't know if they do anything. I started taking them, haven't stopped. Okay, let's see if we can, make sure that you're actually feeling better from the things that you're taking. And do we need to be taking all of these things? Because over supplementation.
Yeah, for sure. Too. And I can relate to that though as well, because when you're in the thickest stuff, like if you're struggling with constipation, if you're struggling with the brain fog, the thyroid issues, like you're grasping at whatever you can to feel better. And that was when I was in the thick of it with like Googling and everything and wanting, I definitely had a supplement graveyard at that point, because I was trying all the different things. So anything I would read, I was like, oh, that helps with thyroid. Oh, cutting out this food helps. So I would try it all. And it never got back to the actual root of what was going on, is that I wasn't fueling myself and I was expending way too much energy, stress, and all that.
Yeah, that's such a good point to make, though, that like, yeah, we try all the things diet wise and like food, cutting things out, adding things in to help, whatever, hormone or gut problem. But we do the same exact thing, sometimes to more extremes with supplements or even medications. Just try to get us to feel better.
Yeah, definitely. And that for me too, since I was so young when I was first diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I was stubborn. I didn't want to take medication. I was like, I had heard that if you start taking Synthroid, like you can never go off of it, your thyroid shuts down. That's not true. But for some reason I had heard that somewhere. And so it's like, I'm never starting that medication. Like, I don't want to be on this for the rest of my life. So I basically just weaned myself off. Side note, this is not recommended for anyone to not do this without a doctor. Like, work with your providers on this. But I was a teenager. So it actually, at this point, I think I was in college. I basically just stopped. I was like, no, I'm going to figure out what to do, because I knew that, I don't know, I guess deep down, I knew there wasn't something like seriously wrong with my thyroid. Like, I knew there was a reason why. And so that's probably where a lot of my desire to get to like the root of what's going on and work with my clients on like identifying it. Because my experience with the doctors and everything, I would say most of them wanted to help me, but they didn't ask the right questions. They weren't looking deeper. Like they were looking at the disease state of my labs. Is it way too low, way too high? They weren't trying to optimize things. They weren't understanding why. They were just putting that Band-Aid on. And you and I see that all the time. And now I see that with clients where they still feel horrible. They still have the low thyroid function, even with the medication, and they're told everything looks fine, but they don't feel fine. And I know you and I, that's where a lot of our work is, and really passionate about helping people not only feel confident in their bodies, but understanding why, like digging deep under doing some labs if we need to, and understanding why they're still feeling that way so that we can address it.
Yeah. So where would you say, either like, where is your health at this point in terms of like thyroid health and your relationship with food, or like, aside from just starting to eat better, like what else? Eat more.
Yes,
Better,
a lot
eat
more.
more.
I eat way more than 1,000 calories now.
Yeah, when was like that tipping point of you like getting better? What else happened there, and where are you at now?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say there's one tipping point, because I think it's been such a stepwise process and it happened over such a span of time. I will give my husband credit here, then boyfriend, now husband. He was the one person that had much more insight into how I was basically abusing my body and seeing that I wasn't nourishing it and everything. And he didn't have any nutrition background or anything, but he also had a very healthy relationship with food. So he worked a lot to help me understand that and help me come out of it. So I would say his support was a big part of it, but just learning more and understanding that my mindset around food and the fact that I wasn't giving myself enough fuel finally clicked. I forget the exact time, but it started to it was a challenge at first. I might have recognized it, but then had a hard time accepting it and fueling more, because I still had this thought in my mind that if I eat more, I'm going to gain weight. So I had a fear of gaining weight for a long, long time. And I did actually gain a little bit more weight when I started eating more. And then it started to taper off. At this point, I don't know exactly where I am. I don't weigh myself at home. I don't really care how much the scale says I weigh at this point. It's really a matter of how I feel in my body. I base it off of how my clothes are fitting, my energy levels, like brain fog, if I'm having that. I'm not on any thyroid medication. I haven't been for years. I still think I'm on a journey, because I believe our health journey never ends. There's so many different seasons of life and challenges. So I'm always learning new things and working to optimize and adjusting if needed. But again, that's where that confidence comes in, and feeling empowered with how to be able to adjust that. So I feel like I'm in a really good place with my health in general, my hormones. My gut health is way better. I don't have any more of those bloating, gas attacks anymore that were so debilitating. Yeah, nothing's perfect, but I definitely am in a much better space now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, anything else that you wanted to share about your own personal story and journey before we wrap up?
I'm sure I'll think of something as soon as we hop off here, but I think I've touched on all the different aspects, and I know I kind of jumped around here a bit, but that was kind of my journey of starting with the dieting. And I think so many women can relate to that too, is there's either like that one time there they had food poisoning or something contributed to their gut issues, or that when they started a diet, they may not recognize it yet, where the trigger point was, or how their journey or how their dieting has gotten them to where they're at now with where they're feeling. But I think talking through my story gives a good example or reason why, shows you why I'm so passionate about the mindset and the actual education knowledge piece of it. I guess this does bring up one other point. I had seen several dietitians as well during this journey, and even they missed it. So I had dietitians tell me to eat less. They put me on a strict meal plan. They put me on a low calorie diet. Like I remember one dietitian that I saw at a gym, I had to eat like nothing but steamed veggies and protein. And this is already after I had been eating like 800 calories for years. I was like, I'm already doing that, but okay. So multiple dietitians and nutritionists just kept trying the same old thing of restrict more, move your body. It wasn't until this one dietitian I met was actually a professor at my then boyfriend, now husband's college. He was taking a nutrition class, actually. He was like, you have to meet with her. So I did. And the meeting lasted like 5 minutes. After she heard my story, she's like, I'm not telling you anything else until you go see a therapist. Because if I give you more information, you're just going to use it against yourself. And you're going to go deeper into this disordered eating hole. So that might have been a tipping point for me to recognize, because I was frustrated by her. I was like, you're not right. That's not going to happen. It totally was. That's what I was doing. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the power of both mindset and maybe bringing in some therapists. There's definitely times I bring in therapists or recommend my clients go to therapy, but with the knowledge and everything is so key to really see a change.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say something, but then I lost my train of thought.
Maybe we'll think about it on the next episode.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I am surprised by how many like similarities we have in our stories. I don't know if we've never like talked in full detail about it, or if it's just that like I haven't really thought a ton about my entire journey enough. It's been a long time. But yeah, it'll be interesting as we talk through my health story and see those crossovers.
Yeah, I think once you're on the other side of it and you're in a good place, it's easy to kind of forget where you have been. And I tend to forget all the things that I have been through with health. So I'm excited to hear your story as well.
Yeah. Oh, and what I was going to say is that when you were talking about like you went and saw dietitians. So like one, times have changed a little bit. I would think
100%.
with dietitians and even like what's being taught in schools. I work with quite a few students that are, like in their internship process. And I can see that things are starting to shift in terms of what they're being educated on. But you really have to find a dietitian that's one going to just connect with you as a person, especially when you're thinking about that mindset piece.
Yeah.
But that's where I think we're kind of unique because we're in the middle of that like functional nutrition and like intuitive eating space, because we don't want to be too extreme on one or the others. And we feel like people need both to be able to really heal and feel better.
Yeah, I think ultimately we want to be in a place where we can trust our body and eat intuitively. But I don't think the discipline ever goes away when you want to actually live in a body that is the healthiest it can be, right? There's times I would love to just eat nachos all day long, but I know I'm not going to feel good. And so I agree, like intuitive eating, I think is ultimately where we want people to be. But sometimes we need to work on the hormone aspect, or we need to bring in some education around nutrition before they can get to a place where they can trust their body again.
Yes, absolutely.
I know.
Well, you and I could talk all day. So
yes. I'm excited to hear about your story next. So I'll leave it at that.